Okay, this video is how to answer question 2 on the Depression, War and Recovery unit. So, as you can see from this question, this is a question 2. To what extent does this case source C accurately explain the contribution made by women during the Second World War? And it's worth 6 marks. So, this question targets your knowledge and understanding, and also your ability to analyse and evaluate a source, particularly the accuracy of the source. The aim of the question is to encourage you to reach a substantiated judgment about the accuracy of the source set within its historical context. So what was happening at this time? Okay, does this make that more or less accurate? Okay, and you'll be rewarded for discussing the strengths and the limitations of the source material. So if we have a look at the banding first of all then, okay, this is what the examiner will use to mark this question. You get up to 2 marks for your own knowledge, okay, so this is about putting it in historical context. So it's looking to see if you've got some understanding of the key feature, that's the contribution made by women in the Second World War, then you get 1 mark. If you show that you've got a detailed understanding of that feature, of what women did during the Second World War, then you get 2 marks, okay? So obviously, the more marks you get are for your analysis and evaluation. That's looking at how accurate you think the source is, okay? If you reach a very basic judgment with no analysis or very small amount of analysis or evaluation, then you just get 1 mark, okay? If you start to analyse, start to look at what is in the source, you start to look at who wrote it, why they might have written it at this time, whether or not it's accurate, you reach a judgment with some support, and you have discussed the accuracy, you're going to get between 2 and 3 marks. To get the 4 marks for this one, you really need to have a look at the context to see what was going on at the time. You need to look at the strengths of the source, why it is accurate, the limitations of the source, what could limit its accuracy, and you also make a judgment, okay, which you have supported, you backed up with some evidence there as well, okay. So to help with this, we'll do this one together, and I've got some success criteria to help you. Okay, so the way I go about this is to first of all go through the source. You could underline or highlight any key points in there. All right, so if we do that first of all. So source C is a young woman describes her working day in a factory in 1943. Okay, so the room was about 40 yards long by 20 broad. So it's not a huge room. Okay, so you've got a small room there. There are benches of small machines and a few large drilling machines on the floor. Altogether, there are about 40 women and a dozen men. Okay, she's using a drilling machine, given a small heap of brass plates to drill holes in. It's quite dark when we come out, again suggesting perhaps that this is the evening, which strikes one with a curious shock of surprise. Okay, for one feels not so much tired, rather as if one has missed the day altogether. Okay, so we'll come on to that in a second. Success criteria, what we do first is to have a look from there, from your own knowledge, what do you recognise as being accurate? What can you support with your own knowledge? We'd also have a look at maybe what is inaccurate, if there's anything inaccurate, or if there's missing. Any information missing from that would accurately explain the contribution made by women during the Second World War, and use your own knowledge to support that. Then we'd have a look at the author, the purpose of it. Does this affect its accuracy? What was happening? Why was it written at that time? Explaining the circumstances. Then we'd have a look at, is this one person typical for everyone's experience at this time as well? And then giving a judgment. So if we take it first of all, if we're looking first of all at this one here, what is accurate and using your own knowledge to support this? If we start first of all by saying that, well, she's working in a factory. Okay, now lots of women worked in factory. In fact, by 1943, okay, 17 million women were working. Okay, and that's because by December 1941 there was conscription for war work for women aged between 19 and 30. There was also a lot of government propaganda trying to encourage women to go to work, particularly in the factories, saying that their contribution to the war effort was just as important as the men working fighting the war in the army. Okay, so 57% of the jobs in factories, okay, by 1943 were done by women. Now, this source mentions 40 women and about a dozen men, so that suggests more women in there. So we could say that's an inaccuracy, but the fact that there were more women working there is accurate. Okay, more women working than men. Okay, and we could back that up with the evidence we have there. Okay, lots of women did work in munitions factories. So this year her machine is a drilling one. She's given a heap of small brass plates to drill holes in. This suggests, okay, we're not sure that it's this munitions factory, but what she's actually making there suggests that there is some sort of weapon or parts for some sort of weapons for the war effort there. So we could also back that up with our own knowledge that they did work, many worked in munitions factories, okay, which was essential. Also she mentions it is dark when we come out, okay, she feels like she's missed the day altogether. That can be backed up with the fact that they did work long hours. Okay, by 1943, when she suggests this is, women were working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. So that would tie in with her account of the contribution made by women during the Second World War as well. That would tie in because she feels like she's missed the day altogether. They wouldn't have had bank holidays either. So that's quite a lot there. You could pick other things out as well, I'm sure, within there. You could pick out working conditions, perhaps, that the room was small, okay, for the amount of machines and the amount of people working there, 37 metres by 18 for, what are we talking, about a dozen men and about 40 women, so we're talking upwards there of 52 people. So we could mention perhaps the poor conditions. But if we think about now what's inaccurate or missing, okay, we have got some things accurate there, but she hasn't really mentioned what type of work she's doing. We're assuming that it's munitions. So, sorry, I can get that back straight for you. She doesn't mention that women also worked in other types of factories, or as mechanics, or engineers, or as drivers. Okay, she doesn't mention the voluntary service that women did, for example, with the ATS. She also doesn't mention pay. Women were paid less than men, even though for doing the same amount of jobs. Some of these factories were also in difficult places to get to because they moved a lot of these munition factories out of the cities. So very often that made travel to and from the factories or where women were working were very difficult as well. So some of that is missing. So in that way, it doesn't accurately explain the contribution made by women. Also, I mean, it mentions work and it doesn't mention the work they did at the home or make, do and mend or those kinds of things as well. Now, if we look at the author herself and the purpose for writing that, okay, what we're looking at, is this coming from a particular perspective? Well, it is. It's from one woman. Okay, so if we've done that one now, sorry. This is one person's view. Okay, it's her description of her day. She doesn't take into account the wider historical context regarding other experiences by other women working during the Second World War. There could be experiences that would be very different for this, that would have more or less impact. So whilst this could be accurate, that doesn't mean it's inaccurate. Whilst it could be accurate for her, it can't fully explain the contribution made by women during the Second World War because it doesn't take into account everybody else's experience. This is one person's experience. So we can't assume that this is typical for everybody. Okay. As far as the purpose of this is, it doesn't say if this is for a TV program, if it's for a book, for a newspaper. We don't know. All we know is she's describing her working day. So what we can do there is assume that she is telling the truth. She does mention here that she has a curious shock of surprise. She doesn't feel tired, even though we're assuming that she's worked a very long day. Could that have been influenced by propaganda, perhaps? But what we really need to look at is the context in which this is written, which we've mentioned here, is that women were working long hours during that time. That is why she is talking about her working day in a factory. Okay, she's talking about what happened there. So we then need to give a judgment. So we need to say, is this accurate? Okay, so we could say that this is, to a certain extent, it is accurate, which we talked about here, but our final judgment would say that whilst this is accurate, it is only one person's experience, and we need to consider those of others for it to be a full explanation of the contribution made by women during the Second World War. Okay, and to back that up with what we need in there. Okay, so that would be worth 6 marks. Okay, so if we've discussed all that in there, we have analysed what is in that source. We've also, to get the accuracy, we've evaluated it because we've made a judgment on it. We have talked about the context of the historical events studied, okay, where we've given specific information there. We have looked at the strengths of the source, we have looked at the limitations of it as well, and we have then made a judgment. Okay, so that is question 2 on the Depression, War and Recovery unit. Have a go at a different one. Have a go yourself, hand it in to me to mark, or have a go at another one using that success criteria, and let's see how we get on. Okay, good luck.